Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Need Stack. We are in a part of a series where we are implementing RESTful resources. In the last two episodes, we have implemented uh, the, the the get methods where we retrieve a list of uh, bots that are stored in a relational database or in MySQL. So we implemented the get kbots and also the get. So we implemented getting a list of bots belonging to a user or getting a specific bot with the bot ID belonging to user. What we're going to do today is we're going to implement the post method, which is for creating resources. So in other words, imagine on our Angular client, after a user has added a new bot, and when the user clicks on create, the information is transferred in as JSON. And what we are going to do to, today is to receive uh, this JSON object, partially completed JSON object, and we're going to insert it into the database. Okay, so let's start. As usual, what we're going to do is this. Oh, sorry, let me close this first. Okay, so what we're going to do is this. We are going to Okay, so we're going to create a new branch, part 22, right? So let's just check again. So we are in part 22, and then we are now going to go to our directory, and start. We will start we will open the editor, and then we will change directory to our source. Okay, so let's start by creating a resource for that. What we will do here is this. We will implement the post method. Oh, remember, this is the method we're going to, so our, oops, mistake. There shouldn't be an ID here. Right. So the post is going to be like this. So we have a post, and this is a resource. Okay. So we're going to go post. Like so. Okay. So let me add that post up here first. Since it's getting a bit long, let me format this a little bit. Post method here. So we're going to have post. So the format is here, the controller, the user ID, the user ID, the resource, and then the post method. And then we're just going to say async. A little bit. Okay, we're going to say async. And then we're going to say post kbot, right? And the post request, so the data that is transferred as part of the payload of the request. Okay, so to retrieve that, we use the body annotation. Okay, so the content of the body, and let's make sure that it has been added. Okay, so it's here. So let me move this guy up here. Okay, like so. So the body and then the payload. It's anything. It's going to be an object. And what we will currently do is that, as usual, we will just return a string first. Okay, and then we just return now. So uh, that is our resource. Let's check this out by just dumping out, just console log out the body payload. Okay, now let's check this thing out. I have created a test post. So that's my test post, and this is the JSON data that I'm going to attempt to send post to this resource. Okay, so I'm going to use so I haven't started the server yet. So let me start the server. So while that is starting, the way I'm going to post is like this. I'm going to say HTTP. Okay, the data is JSON. I will say the post method, and then is localhost 8080 API kbot, and the username is Fred, right? And so I'm just going to go like this, test post. Okay. So if you notice that the body has actually received this, and it has passed it because I'm saying JSON. It actually understood that, and it's made that into it's passed that into a JSON object. Okay. So we have our resource now. So the next step we're going to do is this: we are going to write a database insert. In other words, we're going to take this data, we're going to take this data, and then we're going to insert it into the MySQL database. Okay, so let's add a method to our interface, our persistence interface. And then I'm going to say this is insert kbot. Okay, so remember the bot that we're going to receive is a partial bot. The bot is not a complete bot, right? It doesn't have things like, the bot ID, and stuff like that, because we receive this from our Angular client. So the type is going to be bot. Sorry, the method, the parameter name is going to be bot, and the type is going to be partial. Okay, bot. Okay, and what this method is going to do is this is going to generate a bot ID, use that bot ID to insert it into a database, and then return the bot ID to the caller. So it's going to return a string. So the string is the bot ID that is generated. Okay, so I'll just return a null first and empty string first. Okay, so if you recall, this bot, let me see why am I getting an error here? Uh, let's see why am I getting an error here. Where is it complaining? Oh, sorry, this is the interface. Sorry. Okay, so this is the interface, right? Right. Okay, so it's returning a string. So now we are going to go to our persistence service to implement this persistence service. Okay, so here we're going to implement this. So we're going to say async insert kbot, right? And then the type is partial kbot. And then what it's going to do is this: it's going to return a promise of type string. And I'm just going to go, for the time being, I'm just going to go like this. Okay. So what we will need is this: we're going to need, if you recall from the previous season, where on the front end we use UUID to generate on Angular. We use UUID to generate a UUID, and then we insert it into the next DB. We're going to do the same thing. I will have to install the UUID npm package. Okay, so that has been created. So now I will import the UUID. The UUID package has got a few versions. Okay, so I'm going to use the version 4. So very simple. If you recall, again from the first, from the Angular season, from first season, I'm just going to say bot ID UUID version 4. So this one returns a UUID object. I'm just going to call to string to convert it into string, and then I'm going to take the first 8 character substring 0 to 8. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to need, if you look here, is I'm going to need created on the date, right? Because when I insert it, I want to reflect the date on the server. So I'm going to say created on, and then this is going to be the date. Okay, I'm going to get time. Okay, so this is in milliseconds, right? Okay, so that is done. So the next thing we're going to do now is this: we are now going to insert the uh, this this data into the database. If you look at this data, every bot that is that we have received actually contains two types of record. The first type of record is the K bot, which goes into the K bot table, and then the second group of data is the K card table that goes into the K card table. So so this one JSON object actually, for one JSON object we need to update two tables. So let me just have a look at those two tables. Describe describe kbot. So that's one, right? So this information, okay. So some of this information here, like created by title, etc., needs to go into uh, this table, and then if there are any card, again, we allow we allow a bot to have empty card. If there are any card, then it needs to go into this table. So in other words, when I'm inserting this, uh, I have to update two tables. And if I've inserted the K card, and then when subsequently when I'm inserting the sorry, if when I've inserted a board, and then when I'm subsequently inserting the corresponding card belonging to the board, like these two cards, card one and card two, if there is any failure in the insertion, I need to unroll back everything. In other words, I need to delete everything. So either when I do the insert, the insert will create the records in both the table or not at all. Okay, so what we really need to do is we really need to ensure that this process, because it's a multi-step process, and not only that, but if you see here, there are two cards. So in other words, I need two inserts into the card table. Okay, so this particular JSON object actually has three inserts, three separate SQL insert statement, and all of them has to succeed, right? We cannot have you can have two succeed and then one fail. Okay, so this is incorrect. What we're going to need is we're going to use a feature in relational database called transactions, and transaction has got this property called ACID. Uh, so basically, ACID stands for atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. Atomicity means that uh, everything, all the operations, in my case, the three SQL operations, the three modified SQL operations, has to succeed together, okay, or fail, or none at all. So in other words, the three operations must be atomic, must be considered atomic. Okay. Secondly, it has to ensure that before and after the data has to be valid. So I've got three inserts. I cannot have two inserts and one of the data, one of the record is not inserted. Okay, and also I need to prevent during the middle of the insertion. For example, I've inserted a keyboard and one K card. If subsequently there is another query that try to look try to query the keyboard, it should not see the the unsafe or unfinished operation. It should not, in other words, it should not see the K card that I have not completed finished updating. Okay, uh, the the when I perform two inserts, the operation shouldn't interfere with each other. They should be isolated. Okay, and finally, after all the data is saved, they have to be durable. In other words, you cannot after it's been saved, after the transaction has completed, the data cannot mysteriously disappear, right, without a delete. Okay, so that's the acid property, and we're going to do this. So in relation database, to enforce these acid properties in uh, in in a multi insert or multi update, I will need a transaction. So this is how we do a transaction. Okay, uh, right. So as usual, we will get a connection first. So we just go away, spool, get connection. So we get a connection as before. Notice that we cannot. So remember, in the last episode, we've created this make query, right? So for transactions, and this make query, this method returns a closure. what it basically does is that it hides some boilerplate code, and what it does is this: it gets a connection, it executes a query, and then once it's done, it closes. Okay, for a transaction, all the transaction must all the SQL statement for a transaction to work. In this case, all the SQL statement must be executed in the same connection. So we cannot use this. Okay, so we have to do this manually. So we get a connection. Okay, and then we will put this inside a try catch block as usual, and then we'll do the same thing. If there is an error, we will console error. Okay, and then we will say error. Insert kbot, and then we just list out the error, and then we'll do the same thing again. We just return promise, we'll reject with the error. Okay, and we also do the finally. We will release the connection. Okay, like that. So this is what's going to happen. We're going to inside here. We're going to do insert kbot, and then we're going to say for every card, okay, perform an insertion and insert. Or in the, okay, right? So at minimum, there is one insert, right? And then there can be more than one insert if if there are cards. Okay, so this is okay. So we're going to do this in here. So all the inserts must use the same connection. So let's create the SQL statement first for kbot. Cons SQL. Okay, insert kbot. Right. So let's have a look at what we need to insert in the structures. So we need to insert the bot ID, the user ID, the title, the comments, and the created on. The updated on we don't, because this is for update only. Okay. So these five things, we're going to put these five fields. We're going to say insert into kbot. We'll list out the field names here. Bot ID, user ID, and then we'll say title, comments, and finally the last one is created on. Okay, values. So there's five field: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you recall, when we created the schema, the created on is a timestamp. So this is in seconds. But what we are passing in, what we are getting from what we're getting from the JSON object, sorry, not here. So what we are getting from the JSON object is actually milliseconds. This is actually milliseconds, right? So what we will do is this: we'll use the SQL my SQL function called from Unix time. We'll pass in the millisecond, and then we'll divide it by 1,000. So that's the first method that's the first SQL. Okay, so let's go back to here. And then so we can go await, connection, query. So we go SQL insert, okay, SQL insert, and then we're going to now pass in our list of uh, parameters to fill up those question marks. So let me just put this over here so that we can see what we are inserting. Okay, so bot ID, I've already generated a bot ID, so I'm going to use the bot ID here. The second one is the user ID. The user ID I will get from the bot. Created on. Okay. So if you recall, right, in the first season, the created on is actually an email. Subsequently, what I thought was that it may not be such a great idea, to have the person's email as part of the resource, right? So we use the user ID. The user ID anonymizes or hides the email. Okay. So I'm going to modify this a little bit. So in the original first season, the data for the created by is actually an email. So now I'm going to change it to just the user ID, and also it sort of uh, uh, conforms to our definition uh, in the schema where we say the user ID is actually a primary key for user. So so the oops, so the user ID is actually a foreign key to this user ID, right? This is the email. Okay. What I'll do is this. So that's the creator on. So don't forget, this is now the not the email, but the user ID. And then we have the title. Third one is the title, bot title, and then the bot comments, right? And then finally, we've got created on up here. Created on. So that's our query. So we insert that. Okay, so that is insert. And just to be sure, so remember this is email, the created on. Let me put a note here. Sorry, not created on, created by. Created by is the user ID, not email. Okay, so I think somewhere below here I've got here. Okay, when I return, I'm getting email, so I do not want the email. I just want the user ID. So this is the get kbot method, which I'm just changing. Okay, so now the next thing we need to do is that we need to check if there are any cards. If there are cards, then I need to insert uh, all of them. So the order is very important. I need to insert this first because subsequently the the K cards, the K cards, uh, the card, sorry, the card table has got a foreign key, the bot ID, right? So let's go back to, if you forgot, let's go back to the table here. So you notice that I need to insert this first. The reason is because I need to get the bot ID in first before I can create this, because this is the relationship. This is the foreign key. Okay, so I'm now going to go. I need to check first if there is no, if there are no K card, then I don't need to insert. So I'll just go if uh, bot there are any cards. Okay. If there are, then what I'll do is this. So all the cards can be inserted in parallel. So I'm going to use the promise all. Okay, promise all. Right. And now I'll say bot cards. Okay. I will map all the card to. Let me move this down here so it's easier to read. To say con query. So now I need the insert statement for my uh, inserting into Kcard. Let's look at the structure of the Kcard. This is auto increment ID. I don't need this. I need the bot ID, the description, and priority. So I'll go insert into Kcard, bot ID, the description, and the priority. Okay. So this is simpler, just three methods. Okay. So I'll say SQL insert Kcard, and then let me move this guy down here, and then the three thing, right? I've got the bot ID, okay, and the description. The second is the description, which I'll get from the card here, and then the priority. Okay, so this one returns. So this promise all. So I create an array of these promises, and then the promise all wait for all of them to resolve. Okay, so what I need to do is this: I need to run this inside a transaction. So this is what I do. I'll say con begin transaction. Okay, I'll say await because it's a promise. Oops. Await. So now we start the transaction. So that's my boundary, transaction boundary. Everything before here, everything before is outside of transaction. After this line, everything in here is a transaction. And after I've done this, if everything is good, then I will commit the transaction by doing commit from commit. Okay, right? And if there is any error, so I start the transaction and I'm doing this. If there's any error, it's going to jump to the catch, right? Skipping over the commit. So now I need to roll back, undo everything that I've done inside the transaction, form a rollback, and then I can reject. Okay. So that's my method. So it's actually fairly simple. Now after this, I will return the bot ID that I've generated. Okay. So let's take this method and put it into our resource. So here, what I'll do is this. I'll put it in a try catch block. I'll say catch. If there is any exception, again, I'll just console log out. We will handle this again. We will handle this in a uniform way later in this season. Say error. Post keyboard, and then I'll just print out the error, and then I'll throw the internal server exception. Okay, so now here, I'm just going to go away this database, insert keyboard, and then I'll pass in the payload, my payload. Okay, so now after I've done that, let's just return the bot ID to have a look. Drop this. So that's the method. Let's test this method out and see what happens. Let's just stop and start again. Okay, so let's try this. Right, so if I do this now, there is an error. Okay, unknown field is not command, it's commands. Right, so let's go back here. Sit here somewhere. Okay. Okay, so let's try this again. Clear the screen. Okay, let's try this again. Right, so now it's returned to us this ID. So we can copy this ID. Right, so we perform a post. And now we can go select all from kbot, where bot ID is equals to that. Let's have a look. Okay, right. We can also go select all from kbot summary. Okay, so that's the new. So that's the new field. What's the name? 4DA, right? So it's 4DA. Okay, I can also look at it and say select all from kbot, order by created on. Okay. So that's my sorry. Let's go descending. So that's the bot that I've just inserted. I can insert another bot. Okay. Now, so notice that's the second bot. Right. So we have got this done. Now what we need to do is this: we need to create a response envelope as usual. We need to create a response envelope. So let's go to the command and go response, and then we will create a response envelope. So the response envelope is is it's it's quite similar. It's very simple. I'll just say post kbot response, and the data is just going to be the string. So the data is just going to be the bot ID that's going to be returned. Okay. So let's go back to this controller here. Now we will return the post kbot response. Okay. Okay. So now we can just say, timestamp. Okay. New date, get time. So notice that the response time, the field, at least the fields anyway, is actually quite the same, right? So and we use this repeatedly many times. Notice that we are just repeating ourselves here. Okay. So what I'll do is this: I'll create a utility method to at least to initialize some of these common fields like timestamp and status code and whatnot. I'll put this inside the utility method. So the method is quite simple. We're just going to say export cons make response. Okay, make response is going to be a function. Okay, make response is going to be a, a function that takes a type t. So that this type t cannot be any type. It has to be uh, from. It has to be from the response base. Yes. Has to be from response base. Okay, right? And then we'll take in the status code. And then you return to us the type, this type, and then this is just going to go return this as type. Okay, so sorry, the status code, let me put number here. Okay, so now I can say timestamp. Oh, okay, response base. Okay, so I can now say timestamp. Timestamp is going to be just new date time, and then the status code is just going to be the status code. So it's just going to return a partially filled uh, response. Now to use this, I'll just import this in. Okay. Oops. Okay. So we'll just do this. We just say cons response, make response. So the type is going to be post kbot response. And then the status code for a post, generally if you created something, the status code is going to be 201 that's created. We've used the HTTP status code, status created, like that. Okay. And then we can fill in the data, which is the bot ID. And then now we will just return the response. So, okay, we can say this method returns the HTTP code, right? And HTTP status. Okay, so that's nice. We can very quickly change this as well. So we will just do the same thing. Const create response. Just move this up a bit. Okay, we just create response equals to make query, make response, right? And the data type is get kbot response, and then we'll pass in the HTTP status. Okay. Now we'll just go return the response. there's one more, which is the keyboard, this guy here. Okay, so I'll leave that for you to use the keyboard make response to convert this into that. So now we have actually completed our method, and it's quite simple. So let's see why. Okay, let's see. I'm not sure why it's getting an error. So let's have a look. Okay, make response. Let's see. Utils make response. There's no. Let me just have a look. Okay, so why is this? Why? Oh, sorry, not from response. From utils. Right. Okay. So that should fix that. Okay. So let's clear that again. And now we'll do another insert. So now we've got our data. This is our response. And let's go and have a look. So that's our new insert, right? 88C1. So we got 88C1. So that part is done. We've implemented a post, and you can see, today's implementation is actually very simple. The only thing that we need to keep in mind, because this is a because this resource saving this resource involves multiple SQL statement or modification of multiple SQL statement, we need to put it inside a transaction, so that if anything fails in the middle, in the middle of this series of inserts or modifications, we perform a rollback. Otherwise, we commit. So finally, one last thing before we end, what we'll do is that we will write our Open API spec. So Open API spec is here. Okay. So the Open API spec is going to be slightly different. Most of us, today's one is going to be a post. Oops, post. So it's going to be basically the same. This is a post, right? So the description is add a new bot or kbot for user. Okay, so I would say insert kbot. Okay, the parameters is user ID, and everything is as before. In fact, since this is used so many times, we could actually create a schema for it. Okay, so we now need to describe the body, because this request, unlike a get, which the request doesn't have a payload. The a post actually has a payload. So what we'll do is this. I'm going to go to Open API spec, and we'll look for a post method to see how that's done. So we look for a post method. So notice, to describe the body, we will just use the request body, the description, and then the content is the same as how we return the result, the response, right? So we got content, the type, and then we define the schema. So it's going to be like this. So that this is the post. Then I'll say request body, and then I'll just have a description. Okay, the kbot. It's the new kbot data, and then we'll have content. The type is going to be application JSON schema. is going to be, we'll create a schema for this. Okay, it's going to be this guy. So let me just copy this instead of typing it up. Okay, so I'll say partial kbot, and the response is going to be this. The response is going to be 201. Okay, we're going to say created. Okay, it's going to be JSON, and the type which we're going to define will be post kbot response. Now we will just define these two new schema. So let's go ahead here. We'll do the partial kbot first. The partial kbot is just a minimum. It's just a simpler version of this guy kbot. Okay, so I'll keep this. So this is a partial kbot to describe the post payload. So the partial kbot doesn't have a bot ID, doesn't have a created on, doesn't have updated on. So it has title, is created by, comments, and cuts. Okay, just to check, so this is okay. Now we will just say what is required. The required fields are title, created by. Okay, comments is not mandatory, and the cuts. So out of the four properties, three of them are mandatory. And finally, one last thing that we need to do is we need to create the post kbot response. So the post kbot response is very similar to get kbot response. Post kbot response. So this is the same. The data type is just a string, right? So remember, this is the bot ID. So that's done. We are ready to test this. So if you recall last week, when I was typing, I had an error. I had to pause the video to fix the error. So there is a tool. I was actually going to introduce a tool, in a later episodes, but I find that maybe it's a good time to introduce it now. We'll use this tool subsequently to build our client. So there is this tool called the Open API Generator. It's an NPM. Just to NPM, I install it globally -G, and then you just follow the installation instructions are here. Once you can install it locally or globally. So once it's installed, you can type this. You can type Open API Generator validate. Let me just save this guy first. Validate -I, and then you pass the API into validate. So you tell you what are the errors. So I've got a few errors here, right? So notice that notice that it's saying that this field is this is an unexpected attribute. Okay, so this is actually minimum. It looks like I cannot spell it. Look, the minimum is repeated all over the place. Looks like I cannot spell minimum. So I'm going to change this to minimum, MINIMUM, right? Minimum instead of MIN. So let's go here. Minimum, this guy, right? So let me just go change minimum to minimum. Okay, so I've changed all that. Let's try that again. Okay, so kbot response content. So let's look at 201. Oops. Right, 201. What is it saying? 201. Also, the schema is missing. So component schema kbots response. Okay, so wrong. It's not kbots response. Please. it's kbot response, right? So it's kbot, post kbot response. Okay, so let's just check, make sure that the, okay, it doesn't have to match up with the interface, but I would like to do that. So it's post kbot response. So that's correct. Let's try this again. And finally, one last one. Okay, so this one, the 404 content, what is wrong with that? Okay. Oh, okay, so I'm missing the schema. Okay, so no more validation error. That's good. Now we are ready to test our API. I will pull this guy in our API. Yep, create a new workspace. So I'm going to open this guy. Notice that our path now includes a post. Our schema now has got a lot more things, right? So we will now test the post method. I'm going to say thread. Okay, I'm going to try to insert. So my new bot created by Fred, and then comments, no comments, description. I'll just put simple one to do here. And then the priority, I'm going to leave it at 0. So if I execute this, notice that I've got created. Okay, so the ID, the bot ID is 384. Oops, 384. Right, 384. So that's the new one. So let's try and insert a bot where the user doesn't exist. This guy. So let's come back here and we'll insert, let's say Wilma. So I should now actually get an error, right? So this is correct. I'm getting an error because if you remember, we have got a foreign key constraint where the created by the created by the value of created by field, must have a corresponding entry in the user table. Okay, so this concludes this episode. In this episode, we have seen how to implement, how to use a transaction to ensure that all related data belonging to one resource, it's safe in its entirety or not at all. In the next episode, what we'll do is we will look at the delete post delete method, and it's actually quite simple. Okay, I will check this code in to the repository. Remember, if you want to get this, the branch is branch 22. Okay, till then, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next episode.